There's a lot of mobs here. Just unplug that one. Huh?
Just unplug that one.
Unplug.
You want to plug it in? I don't know.
Well, they say they're not lit, then they're hearing the back.
Yeah,
Oh,
have a hard
okay.
time with
I can talk really, really loud.
Yeah,
Is that-
there you go.
Is that better?
Yep.
Maybe not for recording.
Okay. I'll stand here, so I'll be kind of okay. Is that technologically good?
We're good.
Beautiful. Well, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good, great. I figure a great way to wake everybody up in the morning is to start with a history lesson. Everybody want to do a history lesson? So let me introduce myself first, and also, first of all, thank you to everybody for coming here. I just got in last night, beautiful town. Met, of course, a lot of folks last night and this morning. I'm Eilon Lipton. I'm a development manager at Microsoft on the ASP.NET team. And I was asked to come here to talk to everybody here about ASP.NET 5, formerly known as ASP.NET vNext, formerly known as Project K, formerly known as what are we going to do in the next version. Another slide with my name. There's my email address, so feel free to email me anything, any questions that we don't get a chance to cover here. So history lesson. Don't worry, I'm gonna show a lot of code, a lot of demos as much as I can, but I really want to tell the story of how Microsoft and ASP.NET got to where it is today and where it's going in the future. And to tell you that, actually I'm gonna tell you my story of how I joined Microsoft actually back in 2002 and how I got to where I am today. I've actually been on the ASP.NET team at Microsoft since 2002. I have not changed teams. My resume is covered in dust. I have not had to update it. I've not had to change teams or companies in that long. Do you remember 2002? Yep. A lot of VB6 developers out there, people developing desktop applications for Windows. That's what a lot of the world looked like. Certainly in the business world, that's what it was. I mean, the internet was coming around, but it was really kind of a mix of different technologies. There's no really key standout there. There was a lot of CGI. You remember CGI? CGI, Ben, you remember all that? I was there with many of you, doing CGI applications using Perl and all kinds of crazy regular expressions. There's classic ASP. Classic ASP came out in the mid to late 90s. You could do JScript or VB script. Those were the kind of some hot languages back then. But then this thing came out, .NET 1.0. It's a 20 meg download. Nothing is 20 megs these days, like nothing. And I was just checking out the download. You can still download it off of the Microsoft Download Center. It runs on Windows 98. Seriously, that's how long ago that was. Like people were still developing for these platforms. This brought one brand new language, C#. Of course, we all know that, and Visual Basic .NET, the successor, some would say, to VB6, and a really interesting new web technology, the replacement for classic ASP. Of course, it wasn't called classic ASP back then, it was called ASP. We had to rename it to ASP Classic or Classic ASP, but we brought web forms. And what was web forms? It was VB6 for the web, right? You can drag and drop a control in Visual Studio, you can double click it, add an event handler, set some properties, wire them up. There's an event lifecycle, page load, pre-render complete, and so forth. If you even remember, in the first days of ASP.NET, the default layout was what was called grid layout. Does anybody remember grid layout? Few people. Grid layout means you can drag a control to anywhere on the page. It said like HTML, HTML. Yeah. This control goes here, and this one goes here. If you resize the browser window, don't resize the browser window. This is a Visual Basic form for the web. That's what it was. That was the goal. That was the attraction of the platform. And I personally think it did a really terrific job of that. It made web programming extremely approachable to the people who were doing the most active development of the day, and that was Visual Basic developers building Windows applications. So let's fast forward a few years, 2005. .NET 2.0 came out. I worked on that. I worked on the data source controls, object data source, SQL data source, access data source. And these had companion controls, the data bound controls, the grid views, the tree views, the list controls. And again, very control oriented, very control lifecycle oriented. You can drag and drop these controls onto a visual design surface. You can hook up the events and set the properties. This also brought login controls. Every website you have to log in. This brought controls like for logging in, you can have a username and a password text box. And then also there's a create user wizard control, which is based on the wizard control, where you can sign up, register for a website. A couple more years passed by. .NET 3.5 came out. By the way, this is not a complete history of everything that ever happened in the world of .NET, but it's introduced Link. Link is amazing. I mean, can you remember before then? Like, this was amazing. You could write kind of SQL-looking statements in C# and VB. I think translated into actual SQL statements on the server. You get IntelliSense for everything. Really cool stuff. And then Asp9 Ajax was introduced. Does anybody here use Update Panel? Yeah. I wrote that. I wrote that. Yeah, thank you. But think about what it did. Everybody had to do Ajax. If you're building a website that didn't use Ajax, like, forget about it. You don't exist. Like, you have to have Ajax. Update Panel, love it, hate it, whatever. It said drag and drop this control. It's got a big giant template. Drag and drop more controls into it, or take your existing site and just wrap everything in an update panel. Drop a script manager on there. Ajax. Well, sort of anyway. But hey, a developer with minimal expertise could very quickly create a very rich interface. Now, what exactly was going on in the background? Debatable. Blame me afterwards. A couple more years passed by. MVC was introduced. So I worked on the very first version of MVC. This has been around for some time now. We're on version 5.2 point something, 5.2.2 or 5.2.3. This was a huge change, a huge change in the world of ASP.NET and programming in the .NET world. This said URLs are important. HTML is important. HTTP is important. These things exist on the web, so we have to treat them as first-class citizens, okay? If you remember way back in the earliest web forms days, everything was a post. Every button click, everything was a post. And then what does the user of your website do? They hit refresh. They hit F5 on their browser. What does the browser say? Do you want to post this? What? You all know that message. Do you want to post this form again? And then the product gets added twice to the shopping cart, or they check out twice and they get charged twice. It's kind of a nightmare. This said, in MVC, treat the web like what it is. Use posts for updates, use gets for reads, use redirects, use status codes, use URLs for what they are. And so the world of .NET was evolving. There was kind of this .NET Central Core. I hope this kind of, okay, it's kind of black text on a black screen. Don't worry about it. It says .NET there, and there's like a wavy thing. I don't know. Some designer person came up with that. I didn't come up with that. There's a few kind of core components in the .NET world. Workflow, WCF, the base class libraries, ASP.NET, of course. And these all shipped in the .NET framework, right? This is part of the download. This is part of the update that you have. But then an ecosystem started to grow around it. Those little icons there, that's the NuGet icon. We have libraries like Mock and Antlers for generating compilers, Lucene for search, and Inject for dependency injection. I mean, this is just a small sampling of them. The world is starting to kind of grow around with open source projects and the community really coming around with ASP.NET and .NET. And then Microsoft started doing the same thing too. Said, hey, let's start doing a lot more open source. Let's start developing more rapidly. We don't want big giant framework releases. We want small NuGet packages where you can pick and choose the ones you want. One can be updated without updating the other, and this is where Entity Framework and Web API and MVC itself came out. Fast forward another couple years, 2013. .NET 4.5.1 came out. SignalR for real-time bidirectional communication between clients and servers, another really big innovation for the world of ASP.NET. Entity Framework 6 said, let's take all of Entity Framework. There were previous versions that shipped as NuGet packages. Let's make the whole thing an out-of-band update, so it doesn't rely a whole lot on what's in the .NET Framework. We can innovate and update Entity Framework very rapidly by shipping it as a NuGet package, and open source, of course. Katana came around. Katana was kind of the beginning of going towards what ASP.NET 5 is becoming. Katana said, let's separate web applications from the web servers. It pretty much used to be system.web and web forms for the most part, but of course MVC gaining a lot of popularity at the time, and hosting on IIS on Windows. And that was it. That was the stack, right? Katana said, let's change that. Let's separate out applications from servers by basing it on this open web interface for .NET or OWN. So you now have the ability to self-host applications. You can, instead of running an IIS, you can control the fate of your application. Some systems can't have IIS installed. Maybe they're lighter weight systems, or there are other requirements on that system where it can't be used. And so with that, I want to jump into a demo. So that's about it for the history lesson. Unless you're really interested in more of that. Jump to the demos. So modular apps with ASP.NET 5. So I installed Visual Studio 2015 release candidate. That was released about a month ago at the Build conference. It was about 4 weeks ago or so. I hope this resolution is enough that I can, it's like 640 by 480 or something. See if it actually fits on the screen. Yeah, I don't know if I have to, do I have to zoom in? I do have to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we see this template. This template's been here for a long time. So let me create that. Let me see how much fits on here. Okay, so this top row of templates here, these are the ASP.NET 4.6 templates. Okay, these are templates you've seen. They've been around for some time. But this bottom row of templates is brand new. So we have new ASP.NET 5 preview templates. I want to start out with an empty template to show really how does an ASP.NET 5 project exist. So let me create that. And remember, this change to NuGet packages and being lightweight and modular, you get to pick exactly the bits and pieces that you want. Let's run this, see how simple a simple ASP.NET 5 application can be. So, you know, hello world, right? I mean, that's, you know, but it used to be that hello world, even in web forms, it was actually a lot of code. There's a big project file. Has anybody here written a CS proj or a VB proj file by hand? Like, I mean, it's not possible. Not really, anyway. I mean, you could try, but you really can't. You have to have Visual Studio there to create that. But let's see what it took to build this hello world. So there's a couple new things here. So first, we see this project.json file. Let me move the mouse cursor. This project.json file, this is what we call the source of truth for a project. Now, there is a .xproj in the background here, but it's just a few lines, maybe like 20 lines. You don't even need it, okay? It's just there for Visual Studio. It's just a requirement. But project.json is the actual source of truth. Let me open up and see what's in there. Not a whole lot. You can see pretty much the whole file here, okay? Some of this we'll go into in just a bit, but let me talk about the most interesting parts. There's a set of dependencies. These are NuGet packages, okay? In my case, let me do this full screen. I'm using two NuGet packages. I'm supporting the IIS web server, so I'm actually running on IIS Express right now, and I also support Web Listener, which is how you can self-host applications. I'll show a demo of that in just a minute. I have this command section here. So projects in ASP.NET 5, they can be web projects, they can be class library projects, or they can be console projects. And so we'll see how this command section plays into that. We have a framework section. ASP.NET 5 can run on multiple frameworks. Not only can it run on .NET 4.5.1, we have this concept called DNX. It's the .NET execution environment. please follow along with me. We'll get through this together, I promise. So you can run on full .NET desktop. That's the full .NET framework. It has the GAC. It has all the libraries that you're familiar with. Or you can choose to run on .NET Core. This is a new, small, lightweight, NuGet package-based version of the .NET framework. And this one is cross-platform. This one you can run on Windows. You can run it on Linux. You can run it on Mac. Okay. There's a few more settings here that have to do with websites and compilation. So when I publish a website, you have to be able to publish it somewhere. You want to exclude some files. We want to exclude some node modules. We don't want to ship all the source of all the node modules and the xproj and the Visual Studio, .user file. And then we want to exclude a few things from compilation. So I don't want to compile anything that's in my www root folder. That's only for static files. So that's my project file. It's pretty simple. Let's take a look at the code. And this is all the code in the application. It's the only CS file in the whole application. That's it. That's an entire Hello World application. I don't think ASP.NET was ever quite that simple from a code-based approach. In fact, I could even delete this line here. I don't need that. So there, that's pretty much the simplest Hello World application. Now, I'm not suggesting you all go build Hello World. I've already done that for you. But that's all it is. So let's investigate that a little bit more closely. So we have this startup class. Startup class, it's kind of like the program main of an ASP.NET 5 application. So if you've written a console application, there's program main. It's usually a static method. Here we have a startup class that has a configure method. And in this configure method, what you're expected to do is build up the request pipeline. Now in ASP.NET 4.x and earlier, you have these things called modules and handlers. People know modules and handlers? Okay, great. So modules, you create this pipeline until eventually a handler handles the request. And every module gets a crack at handling the request, saying, I know what to do here. I want to add some authentication information. I want to implement some caching behavior. Well, that's kind of what's going on in here. Except this is Hello World, so I'm not using anything. I just said, when the application starts, every single request that comes in, no matter what, run this code. And what does this code do? It says, response.write hello world. And it couldn't really be much simpler. And that's great because the simple things really should be simple. Okay. So we've done this. So we have this running. That's hello world. Zoom that in a little bit. Let's make a small change here. Let's say hello DNN world. Now all I'm going to do is save. Okay. See, I'm not doing anything else here. Switch over, hit refresh, update. So we've actually eliminated the explicit compilation step as well. Now, in previous versions of ASP.NET, you sometimes had this, you sometimes didn't. If you edited an ASPX file, you didn't have to recompile. But if it was a .cs file, you did. Here, there's no explicit compilation step. Now, the interesting thing here is that, okay, we're going to the root of the site and just saying hello world. But if I go to any URL whatsoever, remember all my application does, it says, I don't care what comes in, response.write hello world, all the time, every day, every night. But what if an error happens? Let's make this thing explode horribly. Throw invalid operation exception, oops. Save, refresh. Oh no, a terrible error. Well, turns out the web server has some basic error handling in it. So there's kind of a little hidden extra step in there that says, something really terrible happened. If the entire application has crashed, then, well, show an error page. You get a stack trace. It's kind of a, neat little thing there. Now this is running on IIS Express. I mentioned earlier that I'm using IIS, but I can also launch from the command line. We saw that web command listed earlier. So let's do that. If I switch over here, there's this run menu, which is set by default to IIS Express. This also lists all the commands in my application. So I can actually choose, I don't want to use IIS Express. I want to use a different web server. Or I want to run a different command to start up my application. I'm going to choose web. So now when I run this, I actually have a console application running. And if I go to the web browser, I'm not running on port whatever I was running on. Hey, look at that, 32,007. No, it's 32,768. Oh, it's almost like a beautiful number, but it's not. Now the default port that this is running on is 5,000. And now we get an HTTP 500 error, because remember, I'm just throwing an exception, but this is obviously not the error page you want to show to somebody visiting your site. Well, where do I get an error page? Well, the answer is you get it from a NuGet package, because that's where everything comes from. And we saw the list of NuGet packages earlier. It's right here in my project.json file. So if I add here, and if the, oh wow, the internet's working. This is beautiful. I want to add, I shouldn't act so surprised, but I mean, you've all been to the hotel rooms. It's a little shaky. I think I was downloading something at like 5 kilobytes per second or something. So we have this diagnostics page. And actually, you see this rich IntelliSense that we have here in the project.json. So you can edit this in Notepad just fine, or in Visual Studio, you have this rich IntelliSense experience. I'm going to use the beta 4 version of the diagnostics page. Now again, I want to show something really neat. In this references node, first of all, we list all the different frameworks that you're using. So we have .NET Framework 4.5.1 and .NET Core 5.0. Let me expand one of these. Now note, I haven't saved that project.json file yet. So let me save that and watch closely this references node. If I actually click in the right place. Oh, it's restoring. It downloaded the NuGet package, installed it. Everything's up to date. All happening in the background. Okay, so now I have the diagnostics page package installed. I need to go use it. So I'll go back to the startup CS. Remember, we have this pipeline here, the sequence of events that happens. So I'll say, oops, caps lock, app.use error page. Now I'll save. Refresh the site. Still, oh, actually, I'm not running the web server. That's why the web page can't be displayed. So let me run the web server. Refresh. Pretty nice error page that didn't load, right? Well, what happened? So what happened, this was on purpose, by the way. Don't worry, I will make many mistakes today. This is not one of them. But what happened here is, remember the sequence of operations in my application. I said the first thing to do is throw an exception. The error page isn't even loaded yet. All I have to do is take this error page, put it up here. Now in this case, because it's a command line application, I do have to restart it. Now when I refresh, much nicer error page. See? Thank you. I hope you'll be so gracious when I mess things up. Now this one's also pretty nice. It's got a little stack trace here. I can see some headers that get passed in and so forth. But this is more of a development time error page. When a user visits your website, you probably don't want to show them stack traces and, oh, these are the headers you sent to my website. It's like, I don't know what a header is. So let's actually do something a little bit fancier. Okay, so I have these these are called middleware components. They're kind of these components that sit, well, they're little bits of logic that sit in between the user and the web server, right? They execute as a pipeline. Now, in IIS and ASP.NET, this was all defined in web.config. Right? You have this list, you can call add, remove, and clear, but it is what it is. You cannot dynamically control that, not really anyway. I think you can use private reflection to do that, but don't do that. Don't do that. I shouldn't have even said that. So I actually want to change the behavior of my application based on whether I'm running in development mode or in production mode or staging or testing. So this is where dependency injection comes in. So I'm going to import this interface. Let me see if I can find iHosting environment. Let me add that namespace. This hosting environment interface provides information about, guess what? The hosting environment. That's right. So what I can say now is if my environment is development, I want to use my rich error page with stack traces and all the full information and details. But if I'm not, what I want to show instead is I want to use, we have another component called the error handler. What the error handler does, this is for when real errors happen when a customer is visiting your website. And what I get to do here is I can either just say run this other path. This is kind of like what you had in web.config. You could say if an error happens, just effectively redirect the user or launch this other page. Or what I'm going to do here is have a little mini application within my application with its own pipeline just for handling errors. So what I'm going to say here is sub app let me zoom out a little bit. So remember, up here I have an application. Here I have now a sub-application. And all I'm going to say here is, actually I'm just going to copy my hello world code. I'll say sub-app. Let me zoom this in. Now, I don't want to throw an exception from there. That would be bad and ironic. So this will be my error page. And of course, you probably do something a little fancy here. You probably log something, maybe send an administrative notification if some error happened. So now, if I'm in development mode, I'll use the error page. If I'm not, I'm going to use the error handler. And should an error happen, I will run this code, this pipeline, which just says, there was an error, so sorry. So let's go ahead and run this. So now the same thing should keep happening. Well, actually, yes. So in the normal case, I'm in development mode, error happened, let's see the rich error page. But I want to switch to production mode. How do I do that? Well, in Visual Studio and ASP.NET 5, there's now a first-class concept of the environment or the mode that my application is in. If I right-click on my project, go to Properties, here in the Debug menu, let me switch back to IIS for this. I can set an environment variable here, and I can say ASP.NET env, and I can say, let's say production. You can call this whatever you want, so I'll just say production. Save. Launch this. Oh, I thought I was running IS Express. Oh, switch back to web. So now I'm running IS Express, and when the error happens, I should. That's not supposed to happen. I think something changed it actually back. Oh, maybe that didn't save. Yeah, okay. Let's see if I try this again. If it doesn't work, I'll just move on ahead. Okay, well, this of course is just not cooperating. Well, what I can do though is I can show instead actually from the command line. So let me open this folder just so I can grab the path. Everything I've shown I can do from the command line. Okay, let me make, oh, this window is, this resolution is very fun to deal with. Let me change this quickly. Okay, great, that fits. Okay, so now we have some commands on the command line where I can run my application as well. So I have this new Dnx command line. That's the .NET execution environment. Remember, everything I was using was Dnx 451, Dnx Core, and so forth. So I can run Dnx. I want to run the project that's in the current folder, and I want to run the web command. So now again, I'm running, and I should be on port 5000. And so that's the error, because we are in production mode right now. Sorry, in development mode. Now, if I kill this, and I set ASP.NET env equals, let's say, staging or something like that, and I run DNX web again. Yeah, so something here is misbehaving. This worked last night. This is presenter error. This is not a product error. But having said that, let's move along. I apologize for that. So next, I want to serve some static files as well. So I talked a little bit about this www root folder. Let's add a file here. So let's add just a plain HTML page. Call it hello.html. Hello from a static file. Okay. Now, if we run our application and I go to localhost, and what was it hello. Oh, look, it's even in my autocomplete there. Hello.html, nothing is getting served up. Now, this is on purpose again. Now, let's see if I can make it work. So, why isn't that working? Well, I didn't tell the web server to support static files. So I need to go back to my project.json file here. And by the way, we have user interface for all this stuff. I actually really like doing this by hand in the project.json file because I really see exactly what's going on. So we have static file, middleware component, use beta 4, hit save. It's refreshing there on the right-hand side. I'll go back to my startup. I'll say app.use static files. We'll save that, run the application again. And then with a little bit of luck, there you have it, static files. So we have this whole middleware pipeline with different components coming from NuGet, working together to build up a pipeline that I can dynamically control. So you now have code-based configuration for every single step of the way. So you can dynamically control based on anything you want. I happen to use an environment variable, which didn't work today. I don't know, environment variables don't work, apparently. This side of the Atlantic, I suppose. It worked last night. Who knows? But you're in full control. You choose exactly which NuGet packages, exactly the versions of the NuGet package, exactly how to use them, and exactly what sequence. You're in absolute full control of everything. Okay, do a few more slides. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so we saw a little quick demo of ASP.NET 5. Well, what is .NET as a whole? It's kind of a very fundamental question. There's a CLR, right? It's got the jitter, the garbage collector, the thing that can take MSIL and turn it into x86 or whatever kind of code. There's compilers, the C# compiler, the VB compiler, all the different libraries, whether they're NuGet packages or things that come with .NET Framework. You have your loaders that can actually load assemblies from disk. And then it runs already in a lot of places, like .NET Framework, phones, tablets, Xboxes, lots of different places. Silverlight ran in the browser, right? That was cross-platform as well. Let's take a look at a comparison of where .NET is coming from and where it's going to. So I have this stack diagram that I stole from a program manager. I'm a development manager, so everything for me is code. This I stole from a program manager that I work with, from Damian Edwards, I think I took. So all the way at the bottom, we have an operating system, big surprise. Now, on the left-hand side is where .NET is coming from, and then on the right-hand side is where we're going to. So while we used to support only Windows, we still support Windows, of course. It'd be kind of, a little funny if we didn't. But we also support Mac OS and Linux. On top of that, there's a runtime loader. This is the thing that has to boot up the CLR itself. The CLR doesn't come out of nowhere. Something has to load it. So you either have IIS with Web Engine, or for a console exe, the OS itself has a hook for launching .NET programs. Now you saw me run this Dnx command from the command line. That's how you launch ASP.NET 5 and DNX-based applications. You have this DNX space and then the project that you want to run. Then there's the actual runtime. We're coming from a world where there's pretty much just one .NET. That's .NET Framework. We're moving to a world where you can still use .NET Framework, or you have this small, lightweight core CLR that's available as a NuGet package. Then there's a series of platform libraries. These are the BCL, your collections and arrays and integers and strings, implementations of link and so forth. These still exist, but they're now also available as NuGet packages. So as the .NET team, who we work very closely with, innovates and adds, let's say, a new collection type or does a bug fix in link, you can download that updated NuGet package and get that today. You don't have to wait for a full .NET Framework release or a QFE or a patch. There's an application host. This is what says this is an application that runs in a particular way. So system.web is what powered ASP.NET applications before. This said, I have an app domain, this is how I will load things, and so forth. In this new world, again, DNX is responsible for that. It's the .NET execution environment. Web server, we came from a world where it was pretty much just IIS. There was the Visual Studio development web server. That thing wasn't very good. I have to admit, I didn't work on that, so I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it. But we're moving to a world where there's more than one web server. We still love IIS. That's the powerful workhorse web server on the Windows platform. This thing has been security hardened and optimized every possible way. But we also support running on HTTP sys. When I ran that web command, I did dnx.web. That's using http.sys. That's the kernel mode HTTP driver in Windows. But those are both Windows solutions, IIS and HTTP sys. Well, we have another third web server that we wrote called Kestrel, which runs cross-platform. So you can run this on Windows or Mac or Linux. And this is, again, it's a command line-based web server that we wrote that works, everywhere. Then you have your various application frameworks. So there's the framework, there's the GAC, there was NuGet. Some things came from each place depending on what component you were using. everything is NuGet now. NuGet is the world. And then there are libraries on top of that. So you can either have a loose DLL laying around on disk, you can have a reference to that. Some things, again, came from the GAC or from NuGet. Once again, NuGet. The NuGet team did not pay me to say this. And then you have your application on top. So how does that come into existence? Ultimately, there has to be MSIL, to be compiled at some point by something. Well, you had your compilers before, MSBuild for your CS files and CodeDOM for your .aspx or Razor files. Now everything's unified. Dnx is responsible for the compilation using Roslyn, which is the new compiler for C# and VB. This whole stack on the right, minus the operating system, open source. So everything's up on GitHub for you to take a look at, for you to debug, for you to file issues in, contribute to, whatever you want. So here we are, 2015. It's an exciting year. We have ASP.NET 5. We saw it. I proved that it exists for anybody who may have doubted me. .NET Core. So I can choose, and I'll show a demo. I think that's the next demo that's coming up, is I can run things on .NET Core instead of desktop.NET, and we'll see how small really is. I said it's a small version of the .NET framework, but how small does that really mean? And we have Entity Framework 7. That's the new data stack, also from my team as well. Open source, cross-platform as well. So the tagline that we have on the ASP.NET website, it says, ASP.NET 5 is a lean and composable framework for building web and cloud applications. Thank you, marketing team. It's beautiful. But we did see lean. We saw how small an application can be. We saw composable. I had to bring in components. Now, this might seem like extra work, but you're not doing this every day. Every day it's like, oh, I really want to create a new application. Oh, I have to add static files. Well, I started from an empty project template. If you create the full project, you have everything in there, and you can just remove the things you don't want, and we'll see that a little bit later. And you can build web applications, and, well, cloud is there a difference between the cloud and the web? Does anybody know that? No, marketing team. Again, developer. So side by side, this is one of the things that NuGet helps you get. You can run multiple versions of the framework and the libraries and everything side by side, and that'll be in the next demo. So how small is small? We have it down to 15 megs. Remember that very first slide that I showed? 20 meg download for .NET 1.0? Well, we have 15 megs here. Now, this is only for web in this case, but as small as 15 megs, you can have a full web application, including .NET Core, all down to 15 megs, compressed, but down to 15 megs. And you can run multiple versions of these side by side. And developer productivity, we saw you can run from the command line. You don't have to use Visual Studio. Everything's much lighter weight. You can edit files by hand, which is actually, I think, really, really huge. And it's cross-platform, so I mentioned the different platforms that we run on. And cross-platform itself is a key to developer productivity. Not everybody these days runs a Windows machine. We have a lot of folks, especially younger folks these days, a lot of folks using Macs, a lot of folks running Linux. So if you even think about kind of the school scenario where people are learning, if you're a teacher teaching, and maybe somebody here is, it can sometimes be difficult to teach something that is Windows only, because maybe half the students in the classroom won't be able to use the technology that you're using. But by supporting effectively all the platforms, all the main platforms that exist, every student, every developer who's just getting started can use this platform. And so we think that's a really huge way to reinvigorate the world of .NET, ASP.NET, and Microsoft. So this really is a big deal. Like, no joke. I'm not here just because I love being in southern France, and it's not because I'm a Formula One fan and I'm going to Monaco in a couple days to worship the whatever happened there last week. Sorry, Hamilton. So we at Microsoft, we don't take this lightly. Okay, like I'm not here to just say like, just trust me. This is like awesome, and you guys got to do this. Have a glass of wine, you'll love it. Now, I do hope you'll love it, and I think you really will. But we've learned a lot. We've learned from web forms and MVC and Web API and any framework and SignalR and all the stuff that the ASP.NET team and the .NET teams in general at Microsoft have been doing. We didn't just go invent this because we felt like throwing out the old stuff. And we're not throwing anything out. We're taking all that knowledge and saying, let's make it all better. There's a slide that I used in some past presentations where, do you know how many different dependency injection systems we supported across different ASP.NET projects? I counted 5, okay? Web Forms didn't even have one. MVC had a system, Web API had a system, Katana had a different system, SignalR had a different system, Entity Framework had a different system. Now, there were reasons for these. These technologies came about at different times with different requirements. Some were cross-platform, some were IIS only, some were using system web, some were not. There were reasons for these, but we want to unify these things. We want to take the best of each of these and bring that forward. So, side-by-side applications. Talked about it, now I'll show it. So we have this application here that I'm running. Now this one is using, well, let me set the default console size so that I don't, what was it doing, like 20 or so. You open another console. By the way, for anybody presenting, set your resolution like super duper low or you'll run into this problem. So let's see, I have another application that I wrote earlier. So the application that we just wrote together on screen, that's using Beta 4. Beta 4 was released along with Visual Studio 2015 RC just a few weeks ago. But the team is working on Beta 5 right now. In fact, we're actually getting started on Beta 6. So we actually have kind of 3 releases going on all at the same time. But hey, NuGet, right? So we have this application. So let's make sure this one's running. This is the one that we wrote earlier, which it just throws errors, but that's okay. Like we know that that's that application, right? There's no doubt about that. And we have this other application here, which if I open up the project.json file, we see that this is using a Beta 5 version. This is using some random build, literally just a random build. I just picked some build off our nightly feed of NuGet packages. So Beta 5 11786 of IS and Beta 5 12163. Don't write this down because these are all gone already anyway because we've done updates since then. And I'm going to run this application, dnx.web. Oh, I think actually I renamed, not on purpose, but let me explain. So another command that we have is this dnvm. That's the .NET version manager. Now by default, my system is set up to use 1.0.0 beta 4. So if I just try to spin up an application, that's what it's going to try to use. But this is a Beta 5 application. Of course, it can't run it. So with dnvm list, I can list all the different versions of the DNX, the .NET execution environment, that I have on my machine. And we see I have several installed. I have 4 different Beta 4s. Why is that? It's not an error. You're not seeing double. It's not from staying up a little late last night, or seeing quadruple even. This is why. I have 2 based on desktop.NET, that's CLR, and I have 2 that are based on core CLR. And then I have a 64-bit and an 86-bit. Okay, I just want to see if you're paying attention. Microsoft, I'm happy to announce, has released 86-bit computing. No, I have a 64-bit and a 32-bit version of each. Glad a few folks are awake. I think a few still need to wake up a little bit. And then I also have these Beta 5 versions installed, okay? So this little star here says this is the active version. Well, I don't want to use that. I want to use, let me see if I can do this here, dnvm use, and I want to run this build of Beta 5. And in fact, I'm going to run this. I'm going to set the flavor to be core CLR. I don't want to use desktop CLR. I want to use core CLR. So let me set that. Okay, now I'm using that. I can say dnx.web, and hopefully this one works. Okay, start it up. I think I have this running on some random other port. I think it was like 5005. So hello, Beta 5 world. So I have 2 applications running at the same time. These are both live. One that just explodes every time you make a request. And one here running Beta 5 side by side. So what does this mean? This means that you can run or deploy or have different projects that you're working on at the same time using completely different versions of everything. There's no requirement whatsoever that you stick to just one version. There's a problem that we sometimes see because even with desktop.NET, you have these quirks modes, you have to set target framework version to different things. And if somebody forgot to set that or has a different setting on their machine or don't have the latest patch installed, you can get slightly different behavior. If you publish to a hoster machine, whether it's GoDaddy or Azure or any kind of cloud system, they might have a slightly different set of patches. And so your only way around that is to use a virtual machine and own everything. So you can still do that, and that's great. But here we say, pick exactly the version you want, stick with that until you want to upgrade. Let me show kind of a nerdy thing. Let me go into, let's go look at the DNX itself. I've been talking about it, I've been running it, but let's go actually see what is this thing. So I'm going to my users folder, Lipton. There's this new .dnx folder. That's where everything is. And in this folder, there's a list of runtimes. Remember that list? When I said DNVM list, that's what it's listing, okay? So we have a bunch of beta 4 versions. We see the core CLR. Oh, I just hit enter or something like that and opened a bunch of windows. Let me close them all. Okay. And then we have also those 2 beta 5 versions as well. So let's take a look at at this beta 5 core CLR. This is the one that we're running right now on that web server. So this is the whole thing. This is the entire CLR plus Roslyn, that's the compiler, plus the bits of hosting ASP.NET itself. So if we look here, there's all these little API folders, that's for Windows compatibility. But if we scroll down, there's core CLR.dll. Zoom in a little bit. It's about 4 megs or so. This is Dnx.exe. That's that tool that I was running from the command line. And then we have here, well, it's unfortunately difficult at this zoom level. Let me put the size here. And then we have, let's see, the compiler's here somewhere. So this is the C# compiler right here. So it's just a few megs. The .ni files, those are the native image files after it gets JITted. So those aren't part of the download size, but they get generated automatically when you run it. So there you have it. And if I go to the beta 4 version, we actually have the NuGet package here. So I said 15 megs. Well, okay, it's a little bit off. It's actually 13.3 megs. That's the download size of the NuGet package. Expanded, of course, it's a little bit more. But that's how small it's down to. So we went from 20 megs for the full .NET Framework 1.0 down to just 13 megs, which includes, again, a very similar set of components. Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. Okay, so side by side. So another thing is you don't have to worry about Windows Update. We will still push out security updates, but only security updates through Windows Update for those. You don't have to worry about not missing out on one of those. But all other patches we'll release as NuGet packages. Download them at your convenience. If you're hitting an issue, find out which package has the fixes you want. It's all on GitHub. Pick that out, use it. Shared web hoster, there's no risk of them breaking. And your development machine is the same as your production machine in terms of your choice. Your production environment or your staging environment, you're choosing exactly which versions of everything to use. And you also get to update as soon as you want. I'll try to see if I have time. I'll quickly tell a story. We went to a major American technology company. We visited them, and we were talking to the development team, and they were bad-mouthing their IT department, saying like, they won't let us install anything. We just want to use .NET 4.5.1. We're stuck on .NET 4.5. The IT department, like, they didn't never let us do anything. Well, at lunchtime, we happened to run in to the IT folks. Developer folks went away, and we were talking to the IT folks. Those developers, they're crazy. They always want to install all kinds of crazy components on a machine. They don't know what they're talking about. They should be happy with what they have. We don't want anybody to run into that anymore. We say, like, use whatever you want. It's a NuGet package. It ships with your application, packaged up, deploy it as you like to the web server, and it'll run there. You don't have to have your IT person install anything extra just for the sake of .NET. So, tag helpers. We'll do a really quick demo of that. Oops. So this time I'll use this third project template. Always on stage this happens. Try this out like 100 times and it's not.
NuGet packages is downloading.
Yeah, exactly. No, it shouldn't be downloading anything actually. There we go. So this time I'll create the full website. And this will look very familiar, so I'll run this once it's created. This is the full thing. This has a login page and registration and a home and about and a contact page. So I'll run this. And I want to show a new feature that we have. Oh, I should still restoring packages. We'll give that another few seconds. So in web forms, we have web controls, which of course encapsulate logic and behavior as well as rendering. And in MVC 6, which is part of Asp Net 5, by the way, version numbers, let me tell you. So this type of application, you've seen this type of project template before. And here on the login page, again, nothing too surprising. Standard thing. If I hit login, I get validation messages. Everybody's seen this before. It's been the same type of project template between web forms, MVC, and so forth. But there's something a little bit different going on here. So let's go check out the views. And then in the account folder, I have this login page. This is a Razor page. There's something a little different here. I wonder if anybody can see what it is. You notice anything different about some of the tags on there? They're purple. So that's it. That's what I want to show you. You're welcome. No, but there's a reason they're purple. There's a reason they're purple. And this wasn't just a designer who was like, hey, purple is a beautiful color. They're also bold. That's what I really want to show. They're bold. But what is going on there? What is going on there? Well, I'll give a small hint. Let me delete one character here. It's not purple anymore. If I undo it, it's purple. So what is going on there? Okay, there's more to this demo than that. This is just plain old HTML. This is just a label. That's an HTML element, right? It has a class attribute. That's perfectly normal, right? But this is not. ASP-4, that is most certainly not HTML. So what is going on there? Well, this is what's called a tag helper. Tag helpers are a way to have programmatic elements on the server attach themselves to the HTML markup of your page. Okay? So you kind of had this in web forms. You could have HTML controls, right? You could have a div run at equals server, and then all the attributes get processed and you can programmatically control them. That's kind of what this is. And so what I get here is, you notice the colorization here. This email attribute might be a little bit difficult to see on the screen, but it's kind of highlighted. That's C# code. It's not HTML. So if I launch up IntelliSense here, this is, if I move my cursor around, this is proper C# code in here. This is not HTML markup. If I type something invalid in here, this will get squiggled. Oh, there you go, squiggled. This won't even compile because I don't have a property called email2. Well, what's so special about that? What's so exciting about this? Well, this is what you would have written in a previous version of MVC. So you'd say html.input. Oh, actually, let me. Oops. Yeah. So actually, my bad. So for this input element, I would say text box 4, and I would say model such that model.email. And now the thing that gets really tricky is I want to set this CSS class on here. Does anybody know how to do that? It's kind of awful. New open squiggly, okay. And now I say class equals form control. Now of course this doesn't work. You all know this. I have to say at class because class is a reserved word in C#. So I have to use at to escape it. Not only that, I might have a typo here and not really even know it, right? So what's so cool? So let me delete that. Let me get that out of the way. Well, with a tag helper, this is HTML. So I have the full HTML IntelliSense in here. I can set an access key for the class. Let's figure out if I was writing this from scratch, class equals, we have bootstrap IntelliSense. You don't get this when you're writing C# code. You don't get HTML IntelliSense when you're writing C# code. But I'm not writing C# code. I'm writing HTML. I can mix some C# code in there, but this is proper HTML. So you get all that beautiful autocomplete for bootstrap or whatever it is that you're doing, and we have various enhancements for that. So we want your HTML that you write, not just the HTML that you render, right? MVC already got you that. You can control exactly what gets rendered. We want you to write the HTML in the most natural way possible, and that means using HTML. Another really quick one I want to show is, so that's an HTML element that's been enhanced. If I go to the layout page, well, it has it's like a master page, but in MVC nomenclature. Are you familiar with the environment HTML tag? Okay, good. There's no such thing, okay? Folks paying attention is great. That's not even a real HTML tag, but we made one. Well, sort of. It's a tag helper. Now, what this tag helper does is a little bit different. This tag helper says, remember I did that check for hosting environment, is environment, development. This is kind of that same thing, but for rendering HTML. Now, I could use an if statement, or I can use a tag helper. So this says, if my environment name is development, render out these style sheets. Or if it's staging or production, render out these style sheets. Now, okay, that's pretty neat. But we can get even fancier than that. Let me scroll down here to the bottom. We have a similar thing here for script files. In development mode, I want to use my local JavaScript files. I've got my jQueries and I don't know what I have here, Bootstraps and Hammer.js and Bootstrap Touch Carousel, all, cool stuff. These are the unminified ones, so I can step into these, debug them, the normal way that I might do. But in staging and production, of course, I don't want to use those. I want to use the ones I have on my CDN, because my CDN is blazingly fast, and everything's minified, and optimized, and geolocated, amazing stuff. But guess what? CDNs fail sometimes. Everybody knows this. I want fallbacks as well. So this script tag starts out as a normal script, source equals, blah, 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 some CDN, and so forth. But we've added, as part of this tag helper, some additional behaviors. We said, add a test for window.jQuery, and if it wasn't loaded, use this fallback source. Okay, so let's see if I can get this guy to run. Let me set my environment. This time, it'll work. So if we go to the properties here, see, I think this was missing earlier. I have to type this all in. So if, let's say I say I'm in staging mode or something like that. Save this, run it. Now if I view the source of this page, no, of course it's not working. was staging one of the, yeah.
Otherwise, just change the names.
Yeah, I could just change the names. That would, I'll change this back, or sorry, development, in case that makes any difference. And then I'll say, you go here, you go here. Yeah, something is misbehaving here. Okay, here we go. Let me zoom this guy in a little bit. So now we have, so remember that jQuery, so this is what got rendered out for jQuery. So I'll try to load it from the CDN. I'll test if jQuery was loaded. If it wasn't loaded, some neat little JavaScript trickery. I'll document.write out a link to my local jQuery that's also been minified. So tag helpers both let you change existing HTML elements as well as just invent your own for any kind of logic that you want to have. Okay, I'll try to run through here. I think I'm like kind of out of time. F5 refresh, automatic compilation. Oops. You don't have to fight the framework. We saw that with HTML. With tag helpers, you get full maximum control, developer productivity, full IntelliSense for everything that you want to do. This is actually a really key point. The development, web development, has changed over 20 years. Remember, we started out taking VB6 developers and saying, go build the web, because that's where developers were. Today, that's not the case. The first applications people are writing these days, quite often, they're web applications. HTML and JavaScript are sometimes the very first things that people learn when it comes to web development. And so we really want to capitalize on that by saying these are first-class citizens. Take that knowledge that you have, that a lot of new folks have, and that everybody in this room has built up over the years, and let's capitalize on that. So instead of trying to take client devs and turn them into web devs, you want to take people with web knowledge and use that. Let me skip through a couple things here. So we do have a new config system, secure by default. It's great. Create some new, we used to have this problem. I'll tell another really quick anecdote. I was helping a customer out. They were saying that their grid view control wasn't working. I was like, grid view control? But that, it's a wonderful control. I know the person who wrote it. It's great. I didn't write the grid view control, but I fixed a couple bugs in it, I think. They were taking their grid view control, storing it in session state, and then on the next page load, we're taking that grid view control out of session state and loading it again. That's crazy. You can't, I mean, you can try to do that, and it sometimes works, but the problem is that it worked locally on their machine because it's using in-memory session state. You can store object graphs. But when they deployed to their server that was on a server farm, guess what? You can't serialize a grid view control and all its child controls and have it work on a different machine. And so I was kind of at a loss of what to tell them, but I think I helped them out, and I said, don't ever do that. So the point here is that the new session state says, give us serialized data. You can't just give us a magical object and we'll just magically serialize it, because it doesn't work a lot of the time. Give us a byte array or something that can be directly serialized. We won't just magically accept things. So these are the platforms that we support: Windows 7 and up, Windows 2008, R2 server and up. Mac OS, we have a homebrew tap. That's a quick way to get booted up with ASP.NET 5. On the Linux world, we're working on things like apt-get, RPM, yum packages. In the meantime, we do have a Docker image that you can use for the containerized view of the world. Let's see. Okay, Bluetooth. Okay, let me quickly show Visual Studio Code. Have people here heard of Visual Studio Code?
Yeah.
Seen it? Okay, several folks seen it. Perfect.
Sublime text.
Yeah, sort of.
C#.
So I'm fortunate to have so many. Look at all these versions of Visual Studio: 2012, 2013, 2015, and this new one, Visual Studio Code. So now this one is cross-platform, right? So you get the same experience on Windows and Mac. People said Visual Studio would never be on a Mac. Well, they were wrong. It is. That's a lighter weight version of Visual Studio for languages like C#. It has full IntelliSense. So if I go open up, let's go find. Let me find where this project was that I just created. So we just created this project. So I can, in Visual Studio Code, I can say File, Open Folder, pick that up. One thing I should note with Visual Studio Code is it doesn't know what Visual Studio Solutions are. So if I scroll down here, it says there's this little, I don't know why there's a little green flame. There's a little green flame, so you want to click on that. And then after you click on that, you say pick a project, and it says, oh, I found a project.json file. Remember, that's the source of truth of an ASP.NET 5 project. And so it'll use that for the sake of compilation. So now inside, let's go to a controller. And so now it's not just syntax highlighting. It is doing syntax highlighting, but I have full, actual, proper IntelliSense for everything. So this is real live IntelliSense. It's not autocomplete. This is actual IntelliSense that it's doing. It knows the types, it knows the references, it knows the NuGet packages for everything.
This the object sharp stuff.
So this is using OmniSharp. Yes, so it's using OmniSharp, which is also available in Sublime Text, Emacs, Vim. Does anybody use Vim? Some people use Vim. I don't know why. It's out there, so people use it. So this is cross-platform. This also has, so for languages like C#, it has full IntelliSense. It also does highlighting at the very least for other languages like Java and Ruby, JavaScript, and so forth. So there's kind of different levels of support for different languages, but a lot of very popular languages out there. This also has Git support. Ran out of time to show that, but you can do Git commits from within here. So you can really use this as a development environment, certainly for cross-platform kind of environments that you might have.
Compiles on Mac as well? You can compile?
Yeah, so the compilers that it uses come from Dnx. And so Dnx is available on Mac, Windows, and Linux. And so, granted, the tool itself is not compiling per se. It in effect shells out to the Dnx compiler to get all the information about IntelliSense, what am I referencing, what are these types, what are the files in the project. Everything in the framework is OSS, so it's not just ASP.NET Core CLR itself, the Roslyn, that's the compilers, that's all open source. A community member even got ASP.NET 5 running on a Raspberry Pi. Like, okay, Visual Studio and a Mac, okay, maybe it was gonna happen eventually. ASP.NET on a Raspberry Pi? Yeah. I don't think so, but there it is. Now, I'm not telling you this because I want you all to go develop, applications for a Raspberry Pi. But the point is that this is a whole new world. We want to enable tinkerers and people who just want to fidget with things and play around and learn. And by virtue of everything being open source and being very collaborative, this is some random person. I don't know who it is. It's just some person from somewhere did this. Didn't ask any of us how to do it or anything. Our documentation is also open source, so we could use some help. Application insights, I'll go through this very quickly. This is basically a system, it's telemetry and information about your application. So this is not just for ASP.NET applications, it's not just for Windows. You can use this for iOS, Java, a lot of other development systems. You can collect stats, errors, everything. You can also create notifications. So if your app crashes more than, let's say once every hour or something like that, you can have an administrative alert sent to you. So you have this live telemetry. It also blurs the line between server-side telemetry and client-side telemetry. So there's a little JavaScript snippet you can stick on your website. And we've worked closely with this team to add ASP.NET 5 preview support. So we have a blog post out there on how to enable this in your ASP.NET 5 applications. It's just one NuGet package you add, one line of configuration, enable the middleware. There's 2 lines code for that. And there you go. You have full live telemetry. And I think I have a screenshot here. I was going to demo it, but the internet's a little finicky. So you get a nice, beautiful screen like that with charts and graphs, and you can export the data, and you can see how is my application actually behaving? What are my page load times? How many errors did I have in the last hour? So, okay, I'm a web forms developer. What do I do? Well, there's still development happening in web forms. Okay, so .NET 4.6 is coming out. We've added support. We have a blog post out there detailing how to use C#6 and VB14 in web forms applications. There's a lot of innovations in the language that you get out of that. Also, web forms itself, we had added model binding support a couple versions ago to web forms. We now have async model binding support. It's kind of important if you're making a database connection, a web service connection. You don't want to hold up a thread. The web forms model itself is not in ASP.NET 5. I think everybody here knew that. If you didn't, well, that's kind of why I'm here. Now, things like HTTP context are still there. Remember, I did response.write. That's an HTTP response. There's an HTTP request. Now, we tried to keep as much as possible with the same names. So you'll certainly have to recompile things. But wherever possible, if you're working directly with HTTP context, request, response, they have the same shape, the same feel. Now, probably the biggest difference in a lot of cases is that there's a lot more async now. The original stuff, there was no async 13 years ago when it all started. Async stuff was added. Now we generally have, wherever there is an async thing, there's often only an async flavor of things. And tag helpers, now, as I said, they're not the same as web forms controls by any means, but you do get some of the same feeling around them, and you also get some of the same rich Visual Studio IntelliSense around them, which is one of the biggest assets that web forms had before. So I had this is really quick. I just hacked this up a few nights ago. Let me see. This will probably look terrible because I'm not a DNN developer, of course. So this is something I hacked up, and it'll probably look crazy, and you'll probably say that I did it wrong, and I probably did do it wrong, and I don't know. So I apologize for that. But what I did is I took the Roslyn NuGet packages and the compilers and everything, and I stuck them in the bin folder here. So I have this Roslyn folder. Okay, I don't know. I did not mean to open that PDB file. So I have here all the Roslyn compilers. This is the same Roslyn compiler that I was just using a few minutes ago in ASP.NET 5. But now I found some random files. So I don't know, default.aspx, whatever that does. Anybody know what that is? So in here, what I can do, let's run this. Let's see if I remember what I did. I don't know, I installed some random build of DNN. I don't even know. I just closed my eyes and clicked on something. Let's load this up. So this hopefully looks familiar in just a moment to everybody here.
The waiting looks familiar.
Oh, yeah, well, let's see if my battery lasts. Loading up. Okay, there we go. So there. It's my cool DNN website. So make sure I'm in the right place. If I just say hello, this yeah, there we go. So hello is kind of way up there in the corner. Oh, it might be a little hard to see. There it is. So I can actually type C#6 in here. So I can do var x equals, or let's say interpolated.
He's writing directly in default.
Yeah, this is a recommended practice, right? But
remember those IT guys you were talking about?
Yeah. So var x equals interpolated. There's nothing special there. But now you see this $ here. I can do something a little neat. I can say this is an, interpolated string coming from var name of x. Okay, so assuming I got this right. Now I didn't install the Visual Studio add-ins for that. That's why I'm getting the syntax highlighting errors there. But oh, I'm using the wrong variable. That's actually a good sign. This is exactly the purpose of this feature. It's supposed to be x. You actually get compiler errors if things are wrong. But here we have this. This is an interpolated string coming from the variable x. So these are I'm just showing two new features of C#6. Interpolated strings is kind of like string.format, but you get to put actual code inside there. So I can even say x dot substring, 1, 2. And this should be some. This is n, I don't know, whatever that substring will show. So this is an int string. So this is a really quick demo to show like there is a lot of value still in the web forms world with ASP.NET. Okay, I'm like super over now. So what is ASP.NET 5? What's after ASP.NET 5? So we did a history lesson coming up, showed a little bit of what's out there now, but what's after? Well, support for VB is coming. We announced that about a month ago. We're also working with the community on F# support. Everything's NuGet, so we want to do a lot of point releases, very, very rapid updates. We've been doing a lot of previews, but even after we hit 1.0 RTM, we're still gonna have a lot of updates. We're not waiting to do big, giant releases. We've seen with a lot of our existing stacks, EF, MVC, Web API, we've been doing a lot of point releases. Support for new platforms. Windows Nano Server was announced as a super small, super lightweight version of Windows. I think it's 300 megs total install size of Windows. It has no GUI. It has no .NET framework. You have to use Core CLR on there. That's how small it is. There's no .NET framework on there. What's the point of a small Windows? Well, it means more memory and CPU for you, but it also means, haha, it's telling me I should finish. The less there is, the fewer patches there are. The fewer patches there are, the fewer reboots there are. Like a typical Windows server probably has to be rebooted once a month just for a security patch. Well, with Windows Nano Server, that's drastically reduced. And then further beyond that, Dotnet Native is a way to take .NET applications. This is used for store applications, for phone and Windows 8 applications today. .NET Native takes your managed code, your C# and VB code, and turns it into native code. I'm not talking about JITting. I'm talking about turning it into actual native code that doesn't use .NET anymore. So this means there can't be any JITting because there's no garbage collector, there's no MSIL anymore. So that's something we want to look at to make startup times of applications much faster and using a lot less memory and with higher throughput. So this is a journey together. I've been using Visual Studio 2015 RC. Don't download it at your hotel room tonight.
That was 3 gigs.
But in the meantime, you can install Visual Studio Code. I have it on a USB stick here. It's, I think, a 60 meg download for Windows. I think it's probably a pretty similar size for the other OSs. Visual Studio Code, of course, free. And this whole success of the platform, a lot of it, I mean, part of the reason I'm here is to talk to everyone here, have this conversation. We need to do this all together, right? No one person can do this alone. Even Microsoft can't do it alone. It takes a community to push something this big through. Everybody in the community depends on it. Everybody in the .NET community really, really cares about this passionately. We'll send out the slides a little later, so don't worry about the links, especially the Channel 9 links, and I don't think you can read them anyway. But yeah, who created this slide deck? GitHub.com/ASP.NET/home, that's our main open source entry point. Docs.asp.net, that's our docs. Got a bunch of videos. You can learn more. I don't even know if I have time for questions. But I do need to sell my sessions. I have a deep dive session this afternoon where we'll go even more details with ASP.NET. And then I have a workshop session tomorrow at some point. So we'll have sign-up sheets available for those. So thank you all very, very much.